This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. First, welcome to the Lawman Exchange. Thanks for joining us at our alternate site this morning. We're really proud of this building. The county purchased this about 7 years ago now. It was an abandoned charter school, literally abandoned in the middle of the night, charter school up and left. And the county bought it a couple years later. We've opened it as the first community center ever in the Lawman community. We brought in, you'll see the Y, brought infant child care. We have small business center, job corps, small bunch of different county services that are available now in this building. We're attached to Ray Neary Park in the back. If you leave today, there's a beautiful boardwalk around the creek if you have time to take a walk. But this is Lawman. If you go a little west, you've got incredible European bakeries and lunch places. If you go east, you've got some of the best Vietnamese food in the Tampa Bay area. If you have a chance when you're leaving, I encourage you to explore the area. So, sure, absolutely. Holland Bay on 34th Street is probably the best spot right around here. So we'll go ahead, we'll call the meeting to order. Let's have roll call.
Commissioner Charlie Justice.
Here.
Commissioner Michael Owen, Vice Chair. Commissioner Jason Bearden. Commissioner Jack Mariano. Colleen Weaver for Commissioner Jack Mariano.
Here, thank you.
Councilmember Ed Montanari.
Here.
Councilmember Lynn Hertog.
Here.
Councilmember Kathleen Beckman.
Here.
Pamela Vasquez for District Director Kelly Boatwright. Governing Board Member James Holton.
Here.
Alicia Burks for Mr. Tom McGill.
Present online.
With that, we have a quorum of 7.
Thank you very much. First on the agenda is approval of changes to the agenda. You received an email, and there's also a handout on your desk for new agenda item 3A and amended agenda item 7C. Are there questions, or is a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Show it passes unanimously. Item number 2, approval of minutes from the February policy board meeting. Any comments, or is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Show it passes unanimously. Item number 3, general citizens' comments. Anyone from? All right. We'll move to item 3A, the 2021 Golden Mangrove Award presentation. Mr. Sherwood.
Yeah, as we traditionally do each year, we try to recognize an outstanding Bay mini grant. And Sheila Sclair is going to introduce our CAC members who are going to be providing the award to this year's recipient.
Good morning, everyone. How are y'all doing? So in mid-April, 4 of our Community Advisory Committee members came together. Oh, sorry. 4 of our Community Advisory Committee members came together to select the 2021 Golden Mangrove Award winner. So this, for those of you who don't know, the Golden Mangrove is a very prestigious award that is presented to the most outstanding Bay mini grant from each grant cycle. So this year there were 13 eligible projects that were eligible for the Golden Mangrove. And so now I will pass it over to Mr. Dylan Furness and Ms. Marjorie Carbonin, who will present the 2021 Golden Mangrove Award.
Should we stand up?
Absolutely.
Margie, you want to give a quick introduction to?
I was just going to say, we go through the Golden Mangrove Award started at your request to have some, we go back and we look at all of the finished projects, the Bay mini grant projects that were done for that year. And the curiosity was, does anyone follow up? So we started following up. We used to do site visits for the last couple of years. We have not, but we review hundreds of pages of documents for the grant proposals and the reports that everyone submitted to us, usually and only the finished projects. This year, I'm going to let Dylan present the award. We we all, as Sheila said, we get together and we decide on who we thought would provided an outstanding project, and sometimes it's in the face of adversity, so.
Yeah, so this year's award goes to Eckerd College and Dr. Bransford's team, who had a really exciting project in which they installed 20 trail cameras in DeSoto Park to document the terrestrial animals that were moving around the park. So there are a number of reasons that we found this so impressive. First of all, they had a public outreach and engagement component, so they had signs in the park where people could use a QR code to go to a website that had additional information about the project. It allowed students to have some in-the-field training opportunities, and it also provided park management with a unique insight into the different species that were moving around the park, and in a way monitor the type of monitor the success of previous restoration and ecological practices that have gone on at the park. There's a website associated with it that has some really cool footage and video up there. I think overall, we just thought it was a really innovative way of using technology to engage youth and engage park goers in a way that we hadn't seen in the past. And by documenting terrestrial species, we often look at the marine species in Tampa Bay, not always the terrestrial ones, and it showed that sort of interconnectedness of the ecosystem that we have here. So with that, I will pass it off to Dr. Bransford, who I think has a presentation. Right?
Yeah, a very quick presentation.
All right.
Can we get a photo?
Can we get a picture? Sorry.
This is Spencer. I will introduce you. That's awesome. Okay, so we had to give a title. It's called Using Camera Traps to Understand Faunal Biodiversity and Distribution at Fort DeSoto Park, and we did that because the county really wanted us to, can you go back? Ooh, sorry, you're good. Wanted a sciencey thing. So there was much more public outreach in this. So there's me with one of our cameras by on North Beach. If you've been, has everybody been to Fort DeSoto at least once? Okay, great. Working with one of those, you can see the sign that was mentioned. I want to give a really special shout out to Professor Beth Voorhees also, who's in the much smaller photo in the corner. But we put this application in, I was really excited about it, and then like 2 weeks later, I found out that my wife was pregnant. And so that changed my availability a little bit. So she really helped out a lot with that project, and I just want to give her a special shout out for that. Okay, cool. The purpose of our project was to use camera traps as a tool to educate, train, and provide some research outcomes to the county, just for general science advancement too. A lot of people go to Fort DeSoto and just to enjoy the beach, right? Not as many people hike around on the trails. Lots of animals live in the park. It's like at the end of a set of keys, and it's a ton of development north of it. And so we get a lot of stuff that just kind of lives there, and people don't really think about that when they go out. So we wanted to help build that connection. So we put out 20 cameras. This is a really awesome, unexpected photo that we got of an American golden plover, which is really rare. And so we started to see every once in a while. We got a lot of things like raccoons, right? Lots of possums. Holy crap, lots of possums. Lots of different types of rats. So that kind of stuff, armadillos. But then every once in a while we get a really special species that popped up, and so that was really cool. So on these 20 cameras, we saw a total of 23 species, mammals, birds, and one reptile, which I'll talk about in a second. Almost 2,000 photos during the grant period. These cameras are actually still out there. So you can go out, the signs are still up, the website's still going, all that stuff. One of the cool things about this project is it can run as long as the cameras work, and we have people to update the website, right? Which can be challenging, but 6 of those cameras. Some of them are kind of hidden in a way, but 6 of them are in really high use areas like the Dog Beach or at North Beach or by the historic fort, that kind of stuff. And so when you go there, you can scan the QR code. Here's what one of the signs looks like. And it takes you straight to the website where recent photos from that site are, so people can see what animals were around when they're not around. And we were much more successful with this than we were anticipating. Our goal was to get 1,500 hits total. We ended up getting a little, like 5,300 hits just in the grant period, and now it's higher than that because it's been another half of a year. We had people from 16 countries, which is pretty awesome, as far away as Indonesia, Thailand, lots of Canada, a couple of Germany's. So that was really cool. And so we're close to around 2,500 unique viewers right now, which is pretty exciting. And we had a ton of student involvement. So on the project, we had a little project team. There were 9 volunteers. Spencer here. And 1 intern. That's Spencer. That's right. But then also we incorporated it into the conservation biology class at Eckerd, and so they worked on that through the spring semester of 2022. Students presented posters at our Eckerd College Research Symposium that we hold annually, and 2 of them won awards for best poster, which was really awesome. There's a photo down there at the bottom of some of our the freshman students actually presenting on species accumulation stuff, and that's Laura. She's one of the volunteers. Go ahead. I just thought I'd show you some fun footage. So this is a great horned owl by one of the, can you go back?
Yeah.
And then click the play button if you can. Yeah. A great horned owl by one of the big shelters.
Oh, wow.
And it landed right in front of our camera and it's just like chowing down on us. So that's really cool. And people disturb the great horned owls all the time at the park because they nest there, they're easy to see, but you always see them in the nest. Who knows what? Yeah, you can go to the next slide. We also saw river otters. This is at one of the cuts that I think Tampa Bay Estuary Program funded about 20 years ago, but we have river otters that come down and stick around the mangroves, come up, which is really cool. And then the next one, this was our most unexpected one. We got a loggerhead sea turtle who decided to just come right in front of our camera. It's like, yeah, right. We were going through, it was, what is this? Totally unexpected. So I mentioned that we had a lot of student involvement. I brought Spencer with me because he was the Tampa Bay Estuary Program funded intern for the project for last summer, and so I was just going to have him talk a little bit about what he did while he was up there.
So what I would do is I think it was Tuesday, I would go out and I would go to half the cameras, collect the SD cards, and go back and upload them. Sometimes I go out more if there was an issue with one of the cameras, but most of the time it's just once a week. Then I would upload those photos to Google Drive and cloud storage, and then I'd sort through them. Most of the time that was not an issue. You know, there's 20 photos, you go through them. Sometimes when there's 100 and you can't see if there's just like a piece of grass blowing, it takes forever to go through all of them. You have to watch all the videos to see it's like, it just doesn't possibly barely go through the camera. So that process was probably the worst part of it. And I would take that and I would make it into data points on a spreadsheet. I would include the species, the time that it was captured, and then also the location that it was at. And then the final thing that I did was I worked on the website. So I did a lot of things involving HTML coding. I had to learn how to do some things because we wanted a map that was able, you could click on where the camera was on the park and you could go to that camera and see the species that were seen there. And then also I just worked on updating the website and adding more to it.
Next.
Oh yeah, and here you can see, these are some of the things that I learned personally from this project was that, field work versus lab work. It wasn't really lab per se, but, I spent a majority of my time just combing through the data. There was a lot of issues before where, either times weren't right or dates were slightly different. Someone put in no zero at some point. So I had to go back and make sure that everything was consistent.
Which is great because this is usually what professors do.
Then the next thing I learned is that coding is really important. From this project and others that I've worked on, it seems like every single time I'm doing something with coding, it's not super complicated, but when no one else knows how to do something, everything kind of starts to fall on you because they know that you can do it. So it's nice to have that extra little skill. And then the amount of work that you put in matters. I was told that this was gonna take my whole week, and it was gonna be really challenging. But I just worked at it consistently, and I ended up finishing something that my, Beth Voorhees was gonna take 20 hours and maybe like 5. I just sat down and just went through it and just kept on going. So that was good. And then the other funding, I mean, we have 20 cameras. It's not that much, but without you guys, this never would have happened. It would have just been, people would have been, okay, there's animals at Fort DeSoto, who cares? And then I also learned that a project's not done with me. When I finished, I thought, kind of put it out of my mind, and then a few weeks later, I got an email, oh, we need to do this next thing, can you work on this part of the website? So I kind of like, even when you're done with the project, it's not done.
Yeah. There's just a map of where the cameras are. The website's desotocams.eckerd.edu if you want to check it out. I can share this, it's on there, I forgot to mention it earlier. You can go to the next one. Thank you, that's it.
Thanks. It just goes to show the power of that small license plate fee being amplified towards projects like this. So.
All the signs have the license plate on.
I noticed that, so thank you.
The website has it on there, they know.
Can I ask just a couple questions
Yeah.
about it? First of all, if you could share that PowerPoint, that would be great, just to have that information.
Yeah.
It's currently in our meeting folder right now too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll send out link.
Okay, what was the grant amount?
I think it's 5,000.
I think there's my son.
Okay, 5,000. And did any of those cameras get vandalized at all, or, because you said they're still up there?
We,
Because one looked kind of low, that looks like a low one.
we fight with people and weather, and sand
Yeah.
a lot. We didn't have any cameras stolen. We had somebody break a lock on a camera and take the SD card, and we're like, oh, that stinks. And then the next day they brought it back and they just deleted the photos on it. Well, it's because, yeah.
Maybe there's other action
Didn't
going
wanna
on
see
in
it.
there.
Yeah, like, they had a camera at the campground, and so we would give people caffeine and not realizing.
CSI.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
There could have been something going on that
Yeah,
they didn't
so-
want you to,
Okay,
It's nothing huge. Yeah.
and then
they brought it back.
this seemed like such a great project. And so, if I linked it in a newsletter and said, this is the award winner and blah, 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 would you guys be inclined to award grant monies for a different area that would like to duplicate something like this?
Yeah.
Okay, because it looks fascinating.
Yeah, usually the contingency is that it can't be the same applicant doing the same project.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, is Eckerd College the applicant or am I the applicant? Because it could, like a student could do this, for instance, right?
if you're proposing maybe different locations, if you're just considering
Yeah.
maintenance, that'd be,
No,
We'd
yeah,
have-
not Fort DeSoto, but like,
Yeah.
Sawgrass or Wheaton or something.
I think it would be discussed through the CAC.
What was the most unusual animal? I mean, we saw the otter, which I've never seen an otter out there, but
Yeah, that was shocking. The otter really surprised us, and then we kept seeing them at the cuts. The 2 cuts, we had a camera at the cut where you first drive into the park and then it came back. There's another cut at the maintenance road. We saw them there. The sea turtle was like weird. And it had a whole bunch of things had to go right. It had to be right there, right? And then reptiles don't produce their own body heat, right? And so they don't usually trigger cameras. So somehow they triggered that. I think my favorite photo is there's a possum walking on the ground, which sure triggers a camera, but at the exact same time there was an owl flying by. And so it looks like it's this really cool like blurry image of this owl just like flying by, and it looks like a little Batman logo. So
any other questions? Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Okay.
Ed, you had one more,
One more surprise, and this is, put someone on the spot a little bit, but what we try to traditionally do is recognize outstanding members of both our technical advisory committee, our management conference, management board and policy board members through Champion of the Bay designation. So this year, we're actually going to consider giving a Champion of the Bay proclamation to Miss Marjorie Carbone for her dedication to the Tampa Bay Sport Program. Marjorie was basically been a CAC member since our inception, all the way back to the 1990s. She's been involved with various volunteer organizations. She's been on the board of directors for Coordinated Childcare of Pinellas County, so she's been a public servant throughout her, throughout her life in the Tampa Bay region. So we want to honor her today just for her efforts through the Tampa Bay ESSER program, and specifically through the Community Advisory Committee. And we have this proclamation designating you a champion of Tampa Bay.
Thank you.
We got you a picture too.
No, I think without Sheila, a lot of this wouldn't happen.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Thank you, Marjorie.
We appreciate all that you do for us. So Marjorie reviews, she's on almost every review subcommittee that we have. So she comes to our Give-A-Day, so she provides a ton of support to the program. And because I'm new with the program, so and Marjorie has the historical experience and historical perspective. So I'm always reaching out to Marjorie for some insight on why things were done a certain way. So I really appreciate all the guidance that you've given me in my short tenure with the program.
Oh,
So thank you.
And hopefully I didn't make up too much of it.
Well, I would know.
I thank you all. This is really very special.
Completely voluntary support as well. So
Yeah. Well,
certainly
it
appreciate it.
has been a long, I won't say it's been a long 30 years, but when I realized how long that's been, my friends go, "Are you still doing that?" And I said, "I won't stop." So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Congratulations. We appreciate your service. All right. Moving on to our action item section of the agenda, we have item number 4, the quarterly financial report. Mr. Sherwood.
Yeah, on page 8 of the packet up on your screen is our quarterly financials representing the first 6 months of fiscal year 2023. So in total, we're about 33% in terms of our revenues. We're a little bit ahead in terms of contributions and donations as well as interest income to the program. And we're actually expecting a significant donation this weekend from Crossway Memorial Fishing Tournament as well. So the adjustments I made to the mid-year budget are going to be low compared to what we're expecting for this weekend. But in terms of federal revenues and fees and contracts, we're a little bit behind. That's just due to some project delays, and that's represented in where we're at in terms of total expenditures, about 27%. The footnotes I have on this quarterly financial report are the same as what was presented at the February board meeting. We had some printing and postage expenses that exceeded what we budgeted back in August, and that was related to distribution of the State of the Bay report. I'm making those adjustments to our budget based on available funds from other operating expenses available to us through our other cooperative agreements, as well as our auditing services. So those expenses are a little bit higher than what we anticipated this year, but as I mentioned, we have those funds to cover it from our 4 other concurrent EPA cooperative agreements. So in total, like I said, we're about 33% in terms of where we're at for total revenues and about 27% in terms of total expenditures. The only thing to mention here is that we were expecting some large grant closures towards the tail end of this year, so we'll probably recognize both those revenues and expenditures towards the 3rd and 4th quarter of this fiscal year. Be happy to answer any questions if you have them on the quarterly financials.
Questions or a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
We have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Show it passes unanimously. Item number 5, mid-year budget amendment. Mr. Sherwood.
So as I just mentioned, based on some of the expenditures, we did make some adjustments to our overall expenses. This is on page 10 of your packets. Actually decreasing our expectations in terms of federal and fees and contracts revenues for this year, just based on the delays I just mentioned. So there's slight reductions there. And then there's a commensurate reduction in terms of our our technical and communications contracts and consultant services. And this is just basically pushing those revenues and expenses probably into the next fiscal year based on some of the project delays that we've heard about from our partners. The increases that I mentioned for auditing services are what we actually realized for this year's audit, and then making those adjustments for printing and postage costs, again, from operating expenditure that we have available from other grants. And then the only thing I wanted to mention as well, we made some adjustments to our insurance costs, and this is our board liability insurance, and we're expecting some increases again this year above and beyond what I budgeted for last August, and that's going to reflect our first quarter of the next fiscal year's insurance costs. Again, usually get those bills around the summertime period and kind of projecting a little bit of increase in terms of those expenses. But overall, we're still budgeting for a little bit over 3 million revenues and a little bit over 3.1 million in terms of total expenditures. Leaving our fund balance still above around $2.5 million at the end of the fiscal year. We have one more opportunity to adjust the budget, and this is when we pass the final budget at the November board meeting, and that brings us as close as possible to both revenues and expenditures we realized through the entire fiscal year. I'd be happy to address any questions you might have on the mid-year budget amendment that we're proposing.
Questions or a motion to accept?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Show it passes unanimously. Item number 6, financial accounting support services contractor. Mr. Sherwood.
This is agenda item 6, and it is on page 11 of the packet. Since 2018, we've contracted out both our financial and accounting and payroll services for the program. And with that original approval back in 2018, we had those services go through fiscal year 2023, our current fiscal year. Based on that authorization to work with our current firm, Carr, Riggs & Ingram, we saw the need to go out for another request for proposals for these services, and we're posting due for the next 5 years. We put out the RFP back in March and asked for proposals by April 13th. We received 2 proposals based on that solicitation, one from Clifton Larson Allen, the other from CS Weston Associates. We held a review committee and ranked those 2 respondents based on the definitions and terms outlined in the RFP. One of those respondents, Clifton Larson Allen, demonstrated a little bit more proficiencies working with similar entities such as us, government entities, other nonprofits within the region. So they ranked a little bit higher than CS Weston Associates. So my recommendation is going to be to enter into a new contract with Clifton Larson and Allen for a cost not to exceed $42,000. This is the advertised amount that we had under the RFP. And then based on their first years of performance, authorized me to renew those agreements for up to 4 additional years, again, to work with them over a 5-year period if they perform well over the first year. Also requesting that the board allow them to sign a resolution to be a signatory on our bank accounts once we reach an agreement with that firm. The only thing I wanted to mention about the RFP process is, the proposal we received from Clifton Larson gave a range of service costs that range from $33,000 to $57,000. So with that in mind, we will be approaching this new contract with them, from a cautious standpoint in terms of, how they'll be billing us over this next fiscal year. Again, we only budgeted for $42,000 of accounting services for these services in fiscal year 2024. So this next year will be, seeing how that relationship works out. It's unfortunate that we did not receive a proposal from our current service provider, Carr, Riggs & Ingram, but we provided an equal opportunity for them to submit, and they unfortunately did not provide a proposal by the due date. So my recommendation stands to move forward with this new contract and work with Clifton Larson Allen. So I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Chair, quick question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the $42,000 is a flat cap. Fees could be more, but you're capped at 42. Is that the way it's?
That's what we budgeted. As we just did, we can make some adjustments to the budget if we have available operating expenses for future years, but that's my recommendation is to cap it at 42,000. We're currently through CRI paying a little bit over $33,000 for accounting services.
And they've agreed to that. I mean,
Yes,
Okay, so-
yeah, and we went into this RFP process recognizing that those costs were gonna go up. That's why we advertised for the $42,000 amount.
And the 42,000 is for the full term of the contract, or is it escalate each year with a CPI, or how does that?
So the proposal they provided was for a range of costs depending on how much time they put in. So their range was 33,000 to 57,000. So I'm capping it for this initial fiscal year of 42,000. So.
Right, when I said going forward in the subsequent years of the contract, is the 42,000 cap gonna go up, or?
It's uncertain based on their proposal until we start negotiating on that.
I didn't know whether you got those points worked out yet. So.
Yeah, CS West came in substantially lower. They just did not demonstrate the same level of experience working with government entities as Clifton Larson.
Clifton Larson's great. I've worked with him before. It's good to cap those fees the best you can and not.
Yeah, and I think.
For change orders and overages and all kinds of.
Yeah, they're going to, be managing a transition from the old accountant and receiving their books. So there's probably going to be a little bit higher cost this first year. And then through time, hopefully over the next 4 years, we'll have an idea of a stable amount that they would be required to retain their services over the next 4 years. And I would present that on a year-by-year basis, working with them and seeing sort of the pace of expenditures that we're seeing working with them.
It's a very unique accounting practice that has to handle this board's expenses. So, further questions? Or a motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The show it passes unanimously. Item number 7.
So a big part of our core operating revenues is inherent to a EPA cooperative agreement that we apply for each fiscal year. We brought our annual work plan in draft form at the last February board meeting. And this basically represents the funds we receive through Congress through Section 320 Clean Water Act appropriations through Congress. We're fortunate this year to see a slight increase in terms of those federal appropriations. So we're seeing $850,000 in federal funds. Through the interlocal agreement, we've matched those federal funds with local sources from the county, city, and water management district. That interlocal agreement was adopted in 2021 and takes us through 2026 in terms of the funds that we match with those federal appropriations. Any shortfalls in the total federal appropriations and the necessary 50-50% match we need to show for this federal agreement is made up for by an in-kind project. And this year we're proposing to use a project from Manatee County. They're developing watershed evaluation for North Manatee County above the Manatee River. And some of those expenditures they'll experience we could use as match as part of this grant. So the total match requirement to make that $850,000 50-50 matches from Manatee County in-kind project is $244,245. So we'll make a similar request next year for an in-kind project if the federal appropriations exceed what our interlocal agreement local match is. But what that allows us to do, if you drill into the full work plan, which is linked within the agenda packet and sort of summarized on the agenda item blurb within the packet on page 11, is to cover our core operating expenses for the most part and a portion of our salaries, as well as fund both technical and outreach and education projects. Based on some of the anticipated changes in our insurance costs, as well as our auditing and accounting services costs, I did have to make some adjustments from what was presented at the February board meeting. I think in total, our total program operations at the February board meeting draft was a little over $893,000. So based on those increases, I had to bump up our total program operations to cover those anticipated increases to about $914,000. That leaves a little over $500,000 to fund these technical and outreach and education projects. And if you click into the work plan and go down to section 2, which outlines the core ongoing projects, as well as what we're proposing as new projects for this new fiscal year, Kind of outlines each of the line items where we were seeing those program operation expenditures that total that 914,000 level. Like I mentioned, I had to budget for increases in terms of auditing services. And I just want to mention, we anticipate having to have some overlap with the existing accounting service provider to close out our current fiscal year and go through the audit. So I actually had to bump up our accounting and payroll services substantially to cover that overlap into the next fiscal year. So a lot of the increases are due to that. But I also just want to mention we're anticipating higher insurance, board liability insurance this year and had to cover that as well in this budget. But in total, all the projects that we were anticipating funding through that draft presented at the last February board meeting still remain the same. They're just the total costs that we're anticipating are slightly adjusted based on those available funds less the program operations costs. We're continue to support benthic seagrass and hydrologic monitoring from some of our partners throughout the region. Continue to support implementation of oyster and as well as stormwater retrofits through our Habitat Master Plan implementation project. Another big project is working to understand the nutrient diet in Old Tampa Bay moving forward, and that's work in partnership with the Nitrogen Management Consortium, and I'll be talking about a little bit about that at the end in terms of a declaration of cooperation that we're developing in partnership with that group, as well as just general community outreach and education projects that we've traditionally funded our Give a Day for the Bay programs. As well as some new experiential education programs that we're starting to develop with different community members that we haven't worked with in the past. So as I mentioned, in total, the total cooperative agreement would be for $1.7 million that we would submit to EPA, and the first two action items under 7A and B are for me to formally submit that once you approve this overall work plan. 7C is asking for the board's approval to consider our long-term plan for another funding source that is coming into the SRA program now, and that is represented under section 4 of our annual work plan. So if you scroll down in that link, it'll come to the bipartisan infrastructure law funding that has been approved through Congress and supporting a little bit over $4.5 million of additional revenues coming to the program to support implementation of RCCMP through the National SRA program via EPA funding. So as you might recall, last year there was 2 restoration themes that were developed for use of this funding. On an annual basis, it equates to about $909,800 coming to the program that we put it back out towards projects that would either support restoration within tidal creeks and addressing some stormwater issues related to tidal creeks and stormwater conveyances throughout the region, or addressing aging wastewater infrastructure issues that we have throughout the region. Based on those discussions last year and the first 2 years of funding that we had available to us to apply for last year, 4 Tidal Creek projects were selected, and if you continue to scroll down in section 4, the first table kind of outlines those 4 projects. Again, supporting Tidal Creek restoration in Pinellas, City, St. Pete, Hillsborough, and Manatee counties. Each of those projects were receiving a little over $450,000 for the first 2 years of funding through this bill source. What we're proposing in this long-term plan is basically earmarking those funds for the next 3 years of funding for 2024, 2025, and 2026. And what we're proposing for this upcoming year, where we submit a new proposal to EPA by October this year, is to fund 3 additional Tidal Creek restorations, as well as 1 living shoreline project that's being pursued now by the city of Tampa. Those 3 projects were actually submitted as part of our Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund grant call earlier this year. And they, based on some of those reviews of that committee, we thought that bill might be the appropriate funding to support those projects. And that will support additional Tidal Creek restoration in Little Bullfrog Creek, Frog Creek and Moccasin Creek in the region, as well as that Living Shoreline project. The final 2 years of bill funding and what we're proposing to use the 2025 and 2026 funds for would be to support that last restoration theme that I talked about and was approved by the boards last year, was addressing some of our aging wastewater infrastructure issues. And right now, under this long-term plan, what we're proposing is to support some of the septic to sewer conversions that are occurring in Hillsborough and Pinellas County, as well as potentially supporting use of reclaimed water in the Coopers Point Tidal circulation master plan. After some conversations with the city, that might change. So again, this is just a plan right now. It doesn't mean that that's what we're going to commit these funds to, so that we have opportunity to update this plan in future fiscal years. But right now, that's where we sort of park those the last 2 years of funding. And the last project I just want to mention is to support some of the incentive or rebate programs that have been discussed in the region to address some of our failing private sewer laterals throughout the region. So that would round out all 5 years of the anticipated bill funding that we would receive through the bipartisan infrastructure law. This long-term plan is due to EPA by June 1st of this year. That's why we're presenting it as part of the work plan to get the board's approval. A component of this long-term plan is developing an equity strategy for the fair distribution of these funds throughout the watershed. Dr. Blake Simmons has done a great job of identifying those areas. There's about 166 census tracts, thank you, that have been identified throughout a region. So a lot of the core projects that I just mentioned are going to affect and benefit a portion of those census tracts. So we think we're going to be more than above and beyond sort of the federal guidelines for supporting some of the equity through these projects that we're proposing. So I just want to mention that within this section 4, there's a full link to basically how we identify those communities in the watershed. There's some open science tools that have been developed, but there is also a document that accompanies that and outlines the long-term equity or the equity strategy under these bill funds. That's another component that we would submit to EPA, and it's due by June 1st. So in total, that rounds out all the action items we're asking this board to consider under agenda item 7. Under agenda item 7, A and B relate to the work plan, and agenda item 7C relates to the long-term plan for bill funds.
Well, the item clarification, the handout says amended item 7C, but it's 8C.
Yeah. Apologies for that.
Any questions? And if you want, Ed will be leading a swim in Joe's Creek after the meeting, right up back.
I've actually had some really exciting conversations with Chris Moore, the CRA director here, about opportunities to partner for Joe's Creek for one of the first round of our bill projects, so.
But I would not actually encourage swimming as we,
No.
as you might meet the resident there, old Joe, who likes to sun himself.
Oh, so you got 4 legs?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Are there questions? It's a lot of information, a lot of good stuff going on.
There's a lot of good stuff. It
Yeah.
does. What a great plan.
If there's no questions, there's a motion to approve items 7A, B, and C.
I move to approve 7A, B, and C.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Show it passes unanimously. Item number 8. Ms. Lewis.
Yeah. Jessica behind us.
Is it okay if I sit here, or do you guys want me to?
You're good.
move somebody over? Great, I'll stand up over. So hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Lewis. There's a couple new faces here. The Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund is in its 11th year. As a reminder, this is a public-private partnership between the Estuary Program and Restore America's Estuaries, which is a 501c3. Y'all, as our board, renewed that agreement in 2020. This year, well, let me give you a little bit more background. How about that? The Estuary Program is a pooled funding program that comes from some of our work plan, a little bit of our work plan, a grant that we received from the Southwest Florida Water Management District, some funds from SEP, which are a legal process, and then also just contributions from individuals and some corporations as well. And all that's included in your background info here too.
Highlighted here.
Yeah, so some of our great partners, Hillsborough County, EPC at Hillsborough County, Pinellas County contribute. a lot of good stuff going in there. So this year, our RFP opened in January. It was open for a couple months, closed in mid-March. We received 15 applications that totaled more than $1.9 million. This year, we had $666,000 available, so we had to pare that down. We went through a review process. A lot of the funders were part of that to help score and provide findings to our executive director, who's made some recommendations based on that. We have all of those projects here in front of you. You can see on the far right, these are our funding recommendations. As Ed mentioned earlier, a few of these we're suggesting being funded through bill, but we're focusing on the TBRF aspect for this today. I think that's all the background info I want to provide to you, but I'm happy to answer questions about individual projects, the TBRF program as a whole, any of the selection process. And then, Mr. Chair, once we get to voting, we'll probably go through item A, B, and C separately because some people will have to abstain.
You don't have to do that for policy.
Just kidding, never.
Okay.
So any questions about TBRF?
Questions?
So just one other point, so there's 6 projects in total that we're putting forward to support through TBRF funds. One of those projects would actually be managed by Restore America's Estuary. It's the Manatee County project, and the 5 other ones would be managed by the estuary program.
Just a quick question, I should have asked it before. I know Congress is talking with the debt ceiling discussions, they're talking about taking back some funding. It's the bipartisan infrastructure.
These funds wouldn't be affected, TBRF funds wouldn't be affected. I have not heard any concern for either bill funding or NEP funding through the Clean Water Act as it stands right now. They're still working through the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, the federal fiscal year.
All right, that was it, thank you.
Further questions? Or a motion to approve item 8.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Show it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Item number 9, Executive Director Staff Reports. Mr. Sherwood.
Yeah, just updates. Bear with me while I get to that portion of the screen. So I just wanted to make mention that we are currently hiring for our science communication coordinator position. Joe Whalen left the program in early March. We advertised that through about April, the end of April. We interviewed some candidates last week and currently extending an offer this week. We're still waiting for an acceptance, but we'll potentially have a new science communication coordinator coming aboard here shortly. Also wanted to make mention that at the 2 Fridays ago, I guess, the Future of the Region Awards, that the Little Manatee River Wild and Scenic River designation, as well as conceptual restoration plan that was funded through TBRF, actually won an Environmental and Natural Resources Award. Just want to present that. That's great news. Continue to kind of work towards the study to actually get full designation of that river as a wild scenic river through federal approvals. But that was great news. Also, City of Tampa won an award, and Pinellas won an award as well. The Ignacio Highway project, we also supported through TBRF as well. So some great news all around. Also want to make mention that Pinellas County is receiving some fairly large NOAA marine debris removal grant funding to support some Tire Reef, tongue-tied, Tire Reef, that artificial reefs that are present in the bay. We've been working with the City of St. Pete and Pinellas County on a project to look at ways to remediate some of those Tire artificial reefs that were thought to be a good idea in the 70s, but maybe not a great idea now as we kind of look back at those systems. So we're looking at ways to remediate that, potentially mitigate and replace some of those materials with more appropriate materials for those artificial reef sites. Last thing I wanted to mention is that I talked about at the February board meeting, we're going through our program evaluation with EPA, which covers fiscal year 2017 through 2022. We actually submitted a package according to their requirements towards early April. It's linked here within my executive director reports. It's another lengthy document, kind of outlines all the outputs from the federal funding we primarily receive through the Clean Water Act funds, but just highlights sort of the breadth of activities that our staff are involved with. It's a lengthy read, but I encourage you to take a look at it just to get an idea of how we use a little bit of funding and try to catalyze action across a lot of different fronts. So expecting that, the program evaluation process and review process through EPA will go smoothly, but we do have a site visit later in the summer where they're going to come down and attend our technical advisory committee, where we'll actually take them out on some sites. We're actually going to get them out on Piney Point to kind of talk about sort of what we dealt with back in 2021 during this PE period. But again, just wanted to mention that to you and bring it to your attention that that's fully linked within your board packet. Be happy to answer any questions. I know Sheila, you want to make mention on some Give a Days that are coming up?
Yeah, so just want to let folks know that we have 2 Give a Days for the bays remaining until we take a break for the summer. For the new folks in the room, our Give a Day for the Bay events are half-day volunteer days that we hold throughout the watershed. We typically host one event every month and then break for the summer because it gets too hot and buggy. Yeah. So we have one coming up this weekend, and that one is going to be at Cockroach Bay Preserve. So that's a planting event. And then the other one we'll be hosting is at Terracea State Park Preserve in Manatee County, and that will be a paddle cleanup on June 10th. So we'd love to see y'all out there, come support these events. And if you have any ideas or projects in your area, please let me know. I'm happy to work with different organizations. So.
I just want to mention, if you go to our main website, if you scroll down to the bottom, that gives you access to our full calendar. We have both these policy board meetings or committee meetings, as well as these Give a Day volunteer events on our full calendar. Click on that and have full access to what we have planned for the upcoming year. That was for the reports.
Okay, item number 10, Tampa Bay Nitrogen Management Consortium Declaration of Cooperation.
So this item I just wanted to bring to the board's attention. This is an initiative that we've been working through the Nitrogen Management Consortium. For those new board members, the estuary program staff has been facilitating this group since the mid-1990s. And basically this is an extended partnership of public and private entities that have nitrogen load responsibility throughout the Tampa Bay watershed, i.e. they all have permits to discharge either to surface waters or to manage discharges that have nutrients within them. So back in 2009 time period, we actually developed allocations of diet for the entire bay in each of the bay segments, and we partitioned that basically the nitrogen loads for each of the bay segments to about 188 distinct permittees throughout the watershed. As we've sort of went through the process of made regular updates to what's called reasonable assurance documents that we submit to the state DEP and EPA on 5-year periods, made some great progress since that time period. We actually peaked in terms of water quality and seagrass conditions back in 2016, but over the last 5-year period, through our last 5-year reasonable assurance period, we actually seen some declines in water quality, particularly in the Old Tampa Bay segment. We saw some significant declines in seagrasses in the upper bay segments, both in Hillsborough Bay as well as Old Tampa Bay and portions of Middle and Lower Tampa Bay. So with this sort of renewed interest in working together towards collaborative solutions to address some of these new and pressing issues, we're advocating through the Nitrogen Management Consortium a new declaration of cooperation, and this is outlining some work that we all see as a need over the next 5 years to address some of these water quality and seagrass loss issues in the bay. So through that declaration of cooperation, and we've used this in the past when we've kind of had these points where we need to keep everyone together, working together for the common goal of restoring seagrasses in Tampa Bay. We've used this as an instrument in the past. We're proposing to do this again for this next 5-year reasonable assurance planning period. And what that allows us also to do is leverage funding from the consortium to help develop some of the documentation and plans moving forward to address these issues. So it's a fairly nominal ask through the Nitrogen Management Consortium. We request about $7,500 from each of the consortium participants to handle this reporting through contractual services that we manage through the SRA program on a 5-year basis. So it's not an annual ask, it's over that entire 5-year period. And basically what the declaration is asking each of the partners to do is work over the next 2 years to fully come up with potentially new or alternative way to manage Old Tampa Bay and the diet and nutrient loading that is going to be necessary to get that bay segment back on track, because that's the one that has been repeatedly not meeting water quality state numeric nutrient criteria, and we've seen most seagrass loss in that particular bay segment. So some of the work plan funding that you just approved would support an assimilative capacity assessment. Basically, that's looking at the diet for that bay segment as it relates to nutrient loads. And we're hoping to get that work out for an RFP towards the tail end of this summer and underway and then completed by next year. And then through the course of each of the entities signing on to this declaration of cooperation, providing that additional $7,500 in funding, that will help us develop that 5-year report at the tail end of 2027 that's due to DEP and EPA. And that will allow us to fully round out and understand what the new assimilative capacity might be for Old Tampa Bay and any strategies that might be different than what we've been doing in the past, and submit that to the department at that point. So just want to make mention to that. I know some of the staff represented on the policy board are starting to get this on agenda, council and commission agendas. But again, all we're asking for is sort of this declaration to work collaboratively together in the region to address these now issues that we're facing in the Upper Bay segment. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and just also want to make mention there's a link to the full declaration that you'll probably be seeing on your board agendas here shortly from staff, but it's also linked within the package itself.
Did they make any presentations to this board? I haven't seen any. Do they bring the science in and talk about their findings?
Yeah, we have in the past, and
Okay.
certainly any outcomes from this work we're anticipating would be presented back to the board as well. We give periodic updates just through staff reports of the
Okay.
Nitrogen Management Consortium, but
Right.
as sort of these new initiatives unfold,
Right.
we'll present that in more of a robust fashion in the future too.
I've heard a lot about them. I've not really seen any of the detailed presentations, so I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, so the way, the structure of the consortium, it is an ad hoc partnership.
Right.
And right now we have an industry co-chair, which is Mr. Santino Provenzano, who sits on our management board as the industry co-chair of the consortium. And then the government co-chair is Jeff Greenwell from Hillsborough County Utilities.
I know Alan Biddlecombe from our county sits on it, so
Yep.
he's mentioned it a lot. I just haven't dove into that.
Yeah, and also linked within that declaration is the reasonable assurance document that was submitted to DEP at the tail end of last year. And that sort of outlined the need for us to work on these issues that we now face in Old Tampa Bay.
Perfect. Good news. Thank you.
So we talked a little bit, Ed, when we did the briefing about what are the acceptable levels of nitrogen. So there are 108 distinct permittees that discharge into Old Tampa Bay.
Permits, an entity can hold multiple permits
Permits,
for discharge.
About how many entities do you think
There's a little-
discharge into the bay?
Represented in the consortium, there's a little over, I think, 45 entities that regularly attend. But if you count all stormwater sources under phase 1 and 2 permits, there's a whole host of CDDs, HOAs that would fall under sort of permitting requirements for addressing nutrient loads today.
And then do they all have the same level of nitrogen that's allowable to dump into the bay?
No, it varies quite a bit based on the source and how we allocated back in that 2009 time period. And that's part of the work that we're anticipating under Old Tampa Bay, whether or not that needs to be adjusted in Old Tampa Bay moving forward.
And is there a dashboard? Do you all have a dashboard, like the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, of the 45 entities and what nitrogen they dump into the bay?
We have summarized loading data based on major source. So whether it's a domestic versus industrial wastewater, atmospheric deposition, stormwater, whether it's material loss from ports, we have it summarized that way. But the underlying data sets, yes, we have loading information from 1985 now through 2021 for all the sources of nitrogen. That we've been using a standardized process to either empirically derive that directly from data that's reported to the department, or we estimate it based on modeling or direct measurements from some of our monitoring agencies.
On our website, we do have that information available, and you can download a file of the entity level information.
I'm just thinking about some peer pressure, like talking to Rich Gardner with Clearwater is like, what's our nitrogen level that's allowable? And then can we get it lower? Can we voluntarily get it lower? And how do we compare to St. Pete or other municipalities or entities that dump into the bay? And have a little pressure and competition, like, y'all are big polluters, you need to do something. We voluntarily lowered ours even more, and you can, what I mean, just to have a big picture of that.
Well, yeah, and certainly as the region continues to grow, we have to be cognizant of what both our wastewater and stormwater loadings are going to be moving forward in the future. And right now, we do have basically caps for each of the entities. So the planning is going to be necessary for each of the entities to stay within those caps moving forward. And that could be additional upgrades of plants to reduce nutrient concentrations and discharges, like using reclaimed water in a beneficial way. So we're always supporting our partners in that fashion to move in those directions, and any projects that would inherently produce a nutrient load reduction, we catalog through our action plan database, and the consortium participants provide that to us. And that's a component of the reasonable assurance plan that we submit to DEP as well. So,
is anybody operating and reducing their nitrogen level consistently? Or are we all kind of at our caps? Are we close to our caps? Have you raised caps? All that kind of stuff.
We haven't raised any caps.
Okay.
It's basically static based on conditions actually represented in 1992 and 1994.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah, so.
And technology and things improve that make it probably a little easier to.
Absolutely. As new technologies come on board,
Which are
and
costly.
we certainly want to make those investments throughout the region to further reduce nutrient loads to the bay. We're especially seeing problems in the upper bay, so any nitrogen load reductions that could occur from all the sources in the upper part of the bay would be a benefit to improving water quality in the future. So, and the only other thing to mention along those lines is there's a lot of federal funding now to pursue some big infrastructure projects. There's state revolving fund funds available to entities, and actually in accessing those SRF funds, you could reference implementation of the National Estuary Program, CCMP, that further provides access and support for access to those funds. I know Pinellas County is pursuing some BRIC funding as well. I think Kelly Levy mentioned that she's been going through that process and could give some tips and tricks for other municipalities that might be interested in accessing those BRIC funds. So there's a lot of funding available to sort of address these long-term nitrogen management planning that we need to do as a region, especially as we continue to grow. So that's going to continue to put strain on our wastewater and our stormwater systems moving forward. Certainly, we're pleasantly surprised to be receiving some restore funding to support some stormwater retrofits in the region as well. We're anticipating that funding towards the tail end of this year as well. So trying to crack, that nut on some of those issues in terms of, reducing nutrients wherever we can, and as funding presents itself to support those projects.
So do we have one of those 45 entities that has been reducing? Do you know? Their numbers are going down. Do we have a star student or anybody that's a leader in the area that's doing a good job? or nobody's producing, really?
Well, the tricky part, for the most part, the wastewater plants have been doing good. They've received allocations that are supportive of technology and sort of the limits that were defined from 92 to 94. I think the issue is they're a low-hanging fruit oftentimes, so it's easier to potentially consider further reductions at those sources to help us achieve water quality goals. The harder nutrient load reductions are stormwater related. We recognize that if we had really large investments or come up with regional stormwater facilities, that might get us to the point where we actually see a water quality improvement. But those are going to take significant amount of investment, and we're trying, like I said, to whittle away on that with some restore funding we're receiving. But I think I mentioned at prior meetings, what we're estimating as a need to reduce stormwater in Old Tampa Bay is about 90 tons. And if we're funding like a stormwater retrofit at the level of about $1 million and achieve maybe, and Randy said that was a generous estimate, 1,000 pounds of nitrogen load reductions, that's about 180 projects that we would need to fully fund. That's a significant amount of money.
Whereas implementing Senate Bill 64 in the Old Tampa Bay segment, for example, if you eliminated those surface water discharges, that represents 80 tons of nitrogen there. So it doesn't mean you would necessarily, by eliminating, you wouldn't necessarily get rid of all 80 tons. But there's a reason that we've had so much success for the most part with wastewater, and it's because it's that point source. I'll add, and you might not, but I think an important context to all of this is the way that we've operated the Nitrogen Management Consortium, and it's Ed and I that are facilitating that group, it was a voluntary effort with everyone getting together to say that, they wanted to work to protect water quality in the Bay. And so the way that we assess compliance with those numeric nutrient criteria is first sort of like an all for one, one for all approach. And so if we're meeting those numeric nutrient criteria at the Bay segment level, we don't dig down deeper and villainize, one or the other. And so we don't always present, we tend to present the information and the trends on that Bay segment scale. And we dig down deeper into the individual entity level when we start to see problems. And we're very cognizant of not wanting to alienate folks. We want to keep, keep saying we want to keep the band together. And so we're interested, I guess, in ways that we could communicate this information transparently with you all, but not play like a good cop, bad cop kind of situation. Because everyone's nitrogen load situation is different. Things that Clearwater might be doing well, we say on wastewater side, for example, that might be true for Clearwater, but not true for Tampa. We might applaud reclaimed water use that's going on in Pasco County, but there are challenges in St. Petersburg. And so if there are ways that you all would like to hear this information, or you have advice for us on how to communicate this so that it's clear and you understand all that, being cognizant of trying to balance keeping all the players, we would be interested in that feedback.
How is the emergency discharge tracking performed when there's a rainy season and you have a big rain event? We had a big rain event, and one of the facilities has to release water, but it's in an area that's shoaled in, which is very difficult on our coastline. That shoaled area the water doesn't mix enough, and it really does much worse damage because of that shoaling, because the water can't dissipate with the salt water as quickly. So how do you all track that?
So it
is
goes
that on
into
there?
the total loading estimates that we develop on a year-to-year basis, and you can actually.
Just goes in the total.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can actually see that was basically Piney Point.
That's Piney Point, okay.
So it factors into the total loading that we estimate on a year-to-year basis. But to your point, we recognize some of our Bay segments are also influenced by other factors.
Yep.
Once those loads are delivered, there's other ways we could potentially remediate and improve water quality in Old Tampa Bay. That's certainly the case, and that's why we've been making the pitch to improve circulation in that bay segment and some of the constrained, some of the things that, the issues that are caused by some of the causeways that span that increased residence time. And once that nutrients are delivered to that bay segment, that's where the algae can sit and cook and cause water quality issues.
Yep.
And affect seagrass, persistent seagrass coverage as well. So that's part of the assessment that we're planning for Old Tampa Bay. It might not be all nutrient related, especially as Senate Bill 64 is implemented by the entities throughout the region. That has to be factored in over the next 10 years of how we might meet water quality targets moving forward. But there are also complementary management actions we can pursue potentially to get the particular bay segments back on track. And that's part of that, some of the capacity assessment.
Thank you.
So this is the website, on our main website. If you go to data visualization that Marcus was mentioning, we have a variety of open data products, Tampa Bay nitrogen loads. You click on that provides the summary and then links to the actual data that will drill down to the individual sources. But we present it on the website in more of a summary fashion to the major nitrogen sources to the bay. Is that Felicia? Felicia, did you?
It was a caller on the line, I think, so. Not sure.
But, the one take home is because we made a concerted effort to reduce nutrient loads, particularly from the 1980 period to now, we've seen water quality improvements. We got seagrasses back. So, that recipe worked. We've recognized there's additional stressors that we have to deal with moving forward, and there's sort of new challenges to meet. So nutrients are always going to be part of the equation, and that's why we're bringing this information to you today. There are also other interventions that we could potentially pursue to improve water quality in the future. But in total, these pie charts just represent the good progress that has been made in the region. The top pie chart is what occurred in the 1970s, when we were primarily dominated by point sources, particularly domestic wastewater being discharged in the bay. That has been much reduced over the current time period. And the largest loading source now is coming from non-point sources. And that's where we're trying to direct some funding and attention towards reducing those nutrient loads from stormwater sources moving forward as much as we can. Again, a lot of information.
Thank you.
But again, our website has a wealth of information. You can dig in on links to a lot of justification of where we've developed allocations in the past and sort of the process that the consortium has pursued to try to manage nutrient loads in the bay. So a wealth of information on our website that we try to provide in an open, transparent fashion. I think that was it for that.
All right.
Unless there's other
further questions, son? All right. Additional packet information, Ms. Burke.
So in the board packet, you'll see a link to our Smart Sheets platform, which is where we track all of the progress we make implementing the various projects that we're managing as a program. So beyond just the annual work plan, the different individual grants that we're managing. So you can see that high level overview, and those are clickable links, and you should have viewing access into the Smart Sheets program. If you ever want help to, walk through some of these data, feel free to give me a call, and I'd be happy to walk through some of that information with you. There's also our technical advisory committee and community advisory committee reports in the packet. Just want you to see a lot of the good work that's been going on in terms of publications, new open science products. There's now a benthic monitoring dashboard that helps us visualize the benthic monitoring data that's been collected for more than 25 years now. Those information are available on our website, as well as lots of different work getting out there in the community, making sure that we're presenting the science and communicating it with both our management conference and members of the public. Scroll down to the community advisory committee. Also been lots of press coverage lately, both about seagrass loss. That press release went out in line with the last February board meeting, and so we got lots of coverage around that, and then certain issues that have come up over over the course of the legislative session where people are asking us to sort of tell them the science and the state of the work that you all have been doing over the past few years. So lots of events out in the community. And then just a high-level overview of our social media metrics and communication metrics. You can kind of see how well we're doing in terms of webpage views, interviews published, social media followers, things that are performing well. So all that information is in the packet. Our next meeting is scheduled for August 18th. We'll be back at the Regional Planning Council with new audiovisual equipment, so hopefully that's more inclusive and accessible for those who are tuning in virtually. But that's all I have.
Very good. Several years ago, when we did one of our strategic planning sessions, the board really wanted a commitment to have everything we do is accessible and open to the public as possible, to share science, all of that. So some of us non-scientists might not understand all the information, but all of it is there and available for the public. So we're really proud that our staff has worked to make that happen for everybody. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right. Appreciate everyone making the trip this morning. We appreciate your time commitment, especially those that are coming from outside Pinellas. And we are adjourned. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.